Welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Natasha from Yarn Over Natasha, and in today's video tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a granny square in the rows instead of in the round and working in a circle. So what it means to make your granny square blanket in rows instead of rounds means that you're going to work your blanket from left to right instead of the classic granny square blanket where you start in the center and then you work one round for the next. This tutorial is only an example, so we're only going to do a swatch of the granny squares made in rows. So I am only going to chain 12 for this tutorial. So the first step you need to do is chain in multiples of 3. Depending on how big you want your blanket, you will be crocheting in multiples of 3. And then to create your first round, you will crochet an extra 6 stitches. So depending on how big you want to make your blanket, that will be in multiples of 3. And then you're going to crochet an extra 6 stitches to do the first round. To create your first row of granny square cluster stitches, we are going to work back into the 6th stitch from your hook. So from your hook, you're going to count 6 stitches back, and then in that 6th stitch from the hook, you're going to make 2 double crochet stitches. This is for the first round of your pattern, and from there, you're going to skip 2 stitches and work your first granny square cluster stitch and from the third stitch from that double crochet stitches you just placed. So skipping 2 stitches, you will be making a double crochet, 3 double crochet stitches within the 1 stitch. That is called a granny square cluster. So that's going to be your first cluster. After you made your first granny square cluster, you're going to skip 2 stitches again, and within the third stitch you will be making your next granny square cluster stitch. That is, like I've mentioned before, 3 double crochet stitches within 1 stitch. You are going to continue this pattern to the end of your foundation chain until you've reached the last 3 chains on your foundation chain that you made for your blanket. Once you have reached the last 3 stitches on your foundation chain, you will only be making 1 double crochet in that very last chain that you have made. So that's the first chain on your hook that you made, and it's now going to be the last one. So that is that for row 1, and we're going to move on to row 2, and I'm going to show you how to build onto this first row. To start your second row of granny square clusters, you're going to chain 3, and then you're going to turn your work. From here, you're now only going to work into the gaps between the clusters and not into the stitches directly above. So the first one you're going to do is 2 double crochet stitches within that first gap that you have on your row from the previous round. And from there, without doing a chain or a slip stitch in between, you're going to work straight into the next gap. For the next gap, we're going to do our first cluster stitches. That is 3 double crochet stitches within that gap. That is going to make your first granny square cluster. And you're going to continue this method till you've reached the end of your round. When you have reached the end of your row, you don't want to do a granny square cluster in that last stitch, otherwise your blanket is going to grow bigger. So you only want to do 1 double crochet stitch into that last stitch that you've made from the previous round. So at the top of the chain 3, you're only going to do a double crochet. So let's go move on to the third round. You're going to chain 3 again. You're going to turn your work. You're going to do 2 double crochet stitches within that first space of your row. And from there, you're just going to continue the method of round 2 that you did, where you only did a granny square cluster in between each cluster till you have reached the last opening, where you will not be placing a granny square cluster because you don't want your blanket to get bigger. You want to stay even on the sides. So at that very last space, you're only going to do a double crochet stitch. So as you can see at the top of that chain 3, you can insert your hook and you're going to do the double crochet, and you are going to continue this pattern till you have reached the desired size of your blanket of the length you wanted. And that is a tutorial of working with granny squares in a row instead of rounds where you start in the center and go outwards.